Hello, and today we're going to take a closer look at what is, or perhaps isn't, going on in the Starmer government. And to do that, we're going to take an article that was published in The Guardian yesterday. um, Rachel Reeves standing firm against U-turn on inheritance tax for farmers. And I'd like to start with one sentence in the article. Downing Street sources confirmed that Reid was only told about the policy on the eve of the budget. There's a lot of work going on in that sentence, so let's start breaking it down. Downing Street sources means off-the-record lobby briefings. This basically means Morgan McSweeney, the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff. Let's take the statement at face value. It means that Number 11, the Chancellor, and the Treasury Department are making major policy decisions without involving line ministries. Well, that's possible, but it doesn't sound like Tony Blair's joined-up policymaking. If it's true, there'll be plenty more policy disasters coming down the road, where one part of the government ignores the knowledge, experience, and ability in any given area and essentially makes policy up on the hoof. Now, Morgan McSweeney is married to Imogen Walker, a Labour MP, and she just happens to be Parliamentary Private Secretary to Rachel Reeves, Chancellor of the Exchequer. Morgan McSweeney's rise was in tandem with Steve Reid. They go back a long way together. McSweeney's first break into politics was through Reid, with Reid becoming the leader of Lambeth Council. So you get the picture. McSweeney and Steve Reid are thick as thieves. That's the Right Honourable Steve Reid, Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. In an interview during last week's farm protests in London, the president of the NFU, Tom Bradshaw, mentioned that he'd started to get wind something was up in the week before the budget. So Morgan McSweeney is spinning that his old pal, the line minister in charge of farming, knew nothing until the day before, yet the farmers were better informed? No, this statement is about the day before is doing a few things. It's protecting Steve Reid from any fallout, and it's hard to believe that DEFRA would not have worked hard to fine-tune what is frankly a cack-handed measure into something more effective. We, the farmers, anyone who's been around politics and economics can see that there are plenty of routes to protecting working farmers' succession whilst closing down the loophole of allowing the super rich to avoid inheritance tax through farm or land ownership. And going further, those with any agricultural policy or agricultural background can see how well thought out measures could be used to improve opportunities across the farming sector. But no, sorry. This statement is also isolating the Chancellor. Look, it's her fault and her fault alone, meaning we can get her to fall on a sword at a time of our convenience. For example, if the political pressure gets too much. Okay, this is all part and parcel of a fairly standard political spin operation, but it's basically screaming from rooftops that we don't know what we're doing. We don't know how to design and agree on policy, let alone implement it. We simply haven't a clue. And this is a bigger problem that goes beyond Rachel Reeves' ministerial future. Number 10 don't seem to have a policy clue and don't yet seem to be able to do the hard work of designing, enacting and implementing policies. It's basically just a political spin operation. And yes, that is important, but they do need some substance to spin off. I think at this point, old school hacks and journalists would be making terrible puns about lipstick and pigs. At this point, yeah, I'm tempted, but no, not that much. So let's broaden out a little. Farming and inheritance tax, the winter fuel allowance. I think we can apply the same analysis to that and come out with some pretty similar conclusions. You don't know what you're doing. A policy that could, with some fine-tuning, have been part of a comprehensive improvement for low-income pensioners, but instead was a bit of a disaster. We can add university tuition fee increases for same. All policy areas where promises were made before the election and completely broken in the first 6 months of Starmer's government. So let's jump to the headline of the Guardian article. Rachel Reeves standing firm against U-turn on inheritance tax for farmers. Well, here's a new policy, and let's be generous and say it's half-baked. No impact assessment, no consultation. We are led to believe that line ministries were not involved. Is there anyone in the Treasury with the knowledge and experience of British agriculture to really have been able to build a coherent new policy all on their own? Yeah, it's possible. Someone probably Googled and ran across some pretty radical left-wing papers from Aaron Advani's Tax Policy Centre. And this has been confirmed in media reports who've spoken to the Treasury. To give you a flavour, they also advocate for forced land nationalisation. I struggle even to believe those words together. And maybe I've got some bias. My PhD touched on how the countries of Central and Eastern Europe moved away from such horrors towards market economies. So wow, we have a major policy shift in an important social, economic and political sector that avoided using the government's experts. And yes, for those of you who are cynical, they do have plenty. They're line ministers, or so we're led to believe, and relied on some pretty out there stuff to justify a massive change. So putting out there that the Chancellor is determined, standing firm, what's going on here with this headline? Is it setting her up for a fall? Intra-cabinet fighting? And then why is the Treasury looking at ways to soften the impact? Meaning making it less bad. Who runs the Treasury? Right. So the headline, we're not changing. The follow-up line is, we're looking to change. Confused? Yeah, I certainly am. Although we looked at the shaggy like, it wasn't me line from McSweeney and Reid, we can see that Reeves' shelf life is less post-budget, with Number 10 having created the space to get rid of her whenever they like. Of course, they'll have other costs for them, to put it mildly. Rather than criticise, how does the Starmer government stop this sort of awful policy making? I would suggest they need to raise their capacity to design, evaluate and create policy in Number 10 to start working in a joined-up way. That'll involve communicating, dialoguing, working collaboratively across government departments, and we haven't seen any sign of that yet, as well as outside of the government. Look, the NFU and the CLA would have been able to very quickly provide constructive input to the farm tax issue, for example. And this is pushing the boat out a bit here, but they probably also need to have an idea of what they're trying to do, a bigger picture. They'll say they do, and it's just a communication issue. Well, maybe, but the little glimpse the farm tax and spin article looked at here suggests that wouldn't make much difference, whilst you don't know what you're doing can be thrown at them, and frankly, it sticks. Thank you.